So this warm-up's pretty much just a puzzle. We're not even going to go over it. But if you want to, you're basically just placing the numbers 1 through 6 in the circles. And you want to get each side of the triangle to add up to 10. Obviously, I didn't do it by doing it that way because I have one side that's only 6, 12 on another, and 12 on another. But you can just move the numbers around. So we're going to be looking today at scatter plots. And scatter plots are a type of statistical graph that's used to determine if there's any patterns that are taking place between the two variables. So scatter plots typically are only written in the first quadrant, only the positive variables, because we don't really look at negative variables too much when we're looking at the statistical data. Scatter plots are going to have a whole bunch of dots, hence why they're called scatter plots, representing all of your data points. The more data points you have, the better you're going to be able to see a pattern. They always have an X and a Y axis label telling you the two things that you're comparing. Scatter plot. And I'm trying to think the best way for me to do this. Alright, let me write down the numbers quick, because if I flip to the next one, I'm not going to have them. Alright, so I have all the points written down. In the chart, remember that your x-axis is always on the left-hand side and your y-axis is going to be over on the right. So we have our seasons here. Seasons. And we have our viewers over here. So season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you want to make sure that you're writing on the lines, not in the boxes themselves. And it looks like our viewers were going anywhere from 20 to about 32. So I'm going to start at 20, 21, 22, 23, and then my top line is going to be 30. So season 1, they had 31.7 million viewers. That's off the chart a little bit up there. 2 was 26.3. About right there. Season 4 was 24.7. 4.7. Season 5, 22.6. And season 6 was 22.1. I know my dots aren't the best, but hopefully what you're able to see is as we look at these dots, you can notice that as the seasons increased, the number of viewers decreased. And that's the sort of pattern or conclusion that we're looking for. That we noticed that as our seasons increased, as our number of seasons grew larger, the number of viewers that were watching was decreasing. Here we're going to create a scatter plot again. This time we're looking at speed versus distance. So 2042, 3074, 3116, 5173, and 6248. Speed. So speed. Then I have distance. So we'll start here with 10, 20, 30, 40. We'll make that 50. And we're going anywhere from a speed of 42 at our lowest to 248 at our highest. So basically, we're jumping by 200s. So in order to get it to fit, we're going to start with 40 and we're going to go up by 20. So 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 40, 60, 80, 200, 220 on the top line, and 240 right above. You want to try to not have your gaps huge. Like, I don't want to go up by 50s. But you want to try to keep everything as tightly fit on the graph as you can. If you do need to go off the graph, obviously, as few as possible. So 2042, 30 had a speed of about 74. Another 30 had a speed of about 116. So you're still on the 30 line, but this time you're going up to 116. So that has actually 2 points for that x-axis. And if you remember from our unit on functions, that would actually make this not a function. 173 would about there, and 60, 248 would be about here. And again, you can notice, hopefully, that we have a trend going upward, a positive trend. If our trend or our pattern is going upward, we say that it has a positive trend. So if we needed to write a conclusion, we would say, as your speed increased, your distance increased. And again, that should make sense. As you're increasing your speed and you're going faster, you should be getting further away from your starting point. Correlation. Correlation is a fancy word for pattern. And there are 3 main types of correlations. Positive correlation, that's what we just saw in the last scatter plot that we created, where we see a positive trend. We see a line going upward. It looks like those dots are forming a straight line. Might be a wide line, but they're still forming a straight line. So your graph's going to go up and to the right, and we would say that it has a positive correlation. Negative correlation, on the other hand, it should appear that your dots are going down when you read the graph from left to right. And no correlation means just that. You can't find any sort of a pattern. Like if I wanted to see if there was a pattern between the score on your test and the number of jelly beans you ate, chances are there isn't going to be a pattern between that data. So everything would just kind of be jumbled around. Then we have a linear correlation. Linear correlation means that when you look at those dots, you should see a line starting to form. Okay? And again, it can be a pretty wide line, but you should be seeing a line forming. So you can have a positive linear correlation or you can have a negative linear correlation, depending on which way the data is. We also have what is known as nonlinear correlation. This would be a positive nonlinear correlation because it definitely looks like the dots are going upward, but hopefully you can see, as I kind of outlined it, you can see this curve happening, and that makes it nonlinear. So here we want to interpret the scatter plot, and unfortunately the scatter plot's not very clear, but we're looking at our data here. Hopefully you are seeing a little bit of a positive linear trend. And because of that, when it's asking you to interpret it, you would tell me what you would see on the graph. So you would say something along the lines of, as the memory increases, the cost also increases. And that's what we saw. As these numbers were getting higher, the cost for my megabytes was also getting higher. So just a short sentence telling what you saw. Same thing. Hopefully you're seeing a negative linear correlation. So as the temperature increased, the number of cups sold decreased. And again, it should make sense. As your temperature gets higher, chances are you're going to sell less hot chocolate. Try these two on your own. For the first one, you should be seeing no correlation. And there isn't anything really else you can say about that there is no pattern. Meanwhile, for the second one, you should be seeing a negative linear correlation and saying something about along the lines of as the time increase, the temp, I'm running out of room, but the temp decreased or the temperature went down. Basically, that's it for scatter plots. You really are just looking for those basic patterns of positive, negative, linear, nonlinear. Your homework is a worksheet. If you don't have it in front of you, you should be able to find it on the website. It does involve some graphing, so if you have the ability to print it out, it'll probably be a little bit easier. But if you don't have the ability to print it out, by all means, just sketch a real basic graph on some paper. Doesn't have to be extremely detailed. Just make sure you have your X and your Y axis labeled.